Hello, everyone. Welcome to Thursday edition of the MSP Initiative Live. We are actually live here in Columbus, Ohio, on the Channel Strong Tour, or at least this week of it. So, without further ado, I'll get into some housekeeping, and then we'll go in. We'll see where we go. So. MSPinitiative.com under sessions. This session and every other session is available and will be available in podcast and video format. So it's all there. It's all live. Some good stuff there. It goes back to hopefully March of 2020. So plenty of good pieces there. Right now we're again on the Channel Strong Tour. So we're on week 2 of 8. They're not consecutive, I promise, but we are touching a lot of parts of America. So if you happen to be in any one of these cities for the rest of the year, we'd love for you to join us. Well, I think we were just about done booking MSP hosts in all of those cities, especially on the tail end. But yeah, we're in week 2. So we have Columbus today, Cincinnati tomorrow. And then you can see the rest of the year is there. So if you're anywhere along the way, we'd love you to come out if you're an MSP. You can actually register, I think, for the next round, which is Chicago, Grand Rapids, Indianapolis, Lexington, and Nashville. And if you happen to be in Cincinnati area or Columbus area today, feel free to throw your name in the hat there, and we will make sure you get an invite. So we do check these. Going to be posting giveaways shortly, right? So our vendors kind of jump together and give us things to get thrown together. We just haven't updated that for this year, so stay tuned. And then I know we're still early in the year-ish, but in Q3 and Q4, you'll see that we will be, just killing my notifications here. We'll be doing these MSP community block parties. And you can see there will be later on in the year. There's 3 planned right now, and we'll notify you on where those will be. And those are always fun. So without further ado, that's the housekeeping. We do have a guest that's going to come on later on, a little bit later in the show. So until then, I'm going to kind of go radio format like we've done in the past for the people that are on the live. And we can talk a little bit more about how things have progressed in IT land. It's now been almost a full 2 weeks since, the news, and, that's kind of rippling through the industry. I know Big Red, Robin Robbins, had a panel of other companies up there, including Rob Ray, which we all know and love. And I know that Fred was from Kaseya was interviewed by Robin. I haven't had a chance to go back and actually get access to those yet. I'm sure they're floating around the internet somewhere. I can surely tell you that along the tour, many people have had opinions about what's going on. And as we've seen people in person, MSPs along the way, small, big, in between, everybody's got a slightly different strategy going right now. Some people are in the wait and see. Some people are in the I'm not going to wait and see. We already know the track record of other companies in the past. And then some people are like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So then there's other people who are like, I don't deal with any of these people. I'm okay. So I would love to hear, now that time has passed, have anybody expanded their thoughts on where you stand and ultimately what you've looked into, what your concerns are, what you've heard. I'm sure different people have had different conversations along the way. Where do we stand? Darren, our favorite guy, who loves to chime in on these things. I think we're going to see you later on today, Darren. How you doing, buddy?
I just got off my first flight. I'm walking through the airport as I connect. So yeah, I might be a little loud, but yes, my thoughts are pretty clear. And I didn't really fully express them last time, but there's things that are inevitable that you have to realize and adapt to, and that's what we're doing. So we're in that process now and plan to continue it. I
So, so,
understand.
so Darren, there's a quick question, right? How's it feel to
Sure.
go through an airport without a mask there, pal?
Oh, actually, so I mean, I've done, I don't know, 150 flights so far. I mean, since COVID and since mask hit, I feel actually over that individual segments, and so I've become quite used to it, and it feels incredibly weird, but also amazing. So it's a breath of fresh air, literally. So
That's clear. That's great
yes,
to see. So Darren, I mean, I don't think you were in on the original call when we started
yeah, just
talking
the
about
first few
it.
minutes, I had to leave. So yeah,
Yeah, you were on another plane. So you have a
yep.
good amount with Datto, right? I think you have some Datto networking. You have some. I think you're on some of the Datto PSA RMM potentially. I know you have the
So,
BDR products out there. So like you got a lot there. That's a lot to unwind. Like where are you looking at each product separately?
well,
Like what
yeah.
is
So
your
here, as I'm looking for where this hotel attached to the Minneapolis airport actually is, I'm multitasking here, um, taking a couple hour, you know, kind of workplace there. But anyway, um, we have everything that you could possibly have, essentially. And my concerns are, my concern, I'm not worried about the PSA. We don't use the PSA in a way that most do. So it's not as critical. I'm not worried about RMM yet. And we actually do really like that RMM, I will say. I mean, it was a long process of evaluation and adoption and implementation. So that's not my bigger concern. It's the backups that I'm focusing on, the BDR stuff. That is where I'm most concerned, because we just can't have that
is
stuff
that
not
is
work.
that is that the hard? Assuming that's the hardest. Do you feel like that's the most important one, or is that the hardest one to change?
I actually think it's the most important, but also not the hardest to change. In looking into the solutions I've been looking into, which I can name or not name if you would prefer, but
Totally
I
up to
could,
you. No,
yeah,
no, no rules
I
here.
mean, yeah. So I have, interestingly, the company that I'm looking at, when I was first making the decision to go with Datto, um, many years ago, this was the other company that I also had been looking at, but at the time I felt it was not nearly as evolved or as good. I didn't see the momentum that I saw with Datto, so I went to Datto and didn't look back with that stuff. But now, as I'm looking at Axient, I am pleasantly surprised to see lots of things there, and also from talking to many others that have, even before this, were making the switch for one reason or another. And that gives me a lot of confidence, people that I respect and trust in this industry. So yeah, that is where I'm looking, and I don't think it'll be as painful as some might think, with the exception of trying to figure out your historic situation. But that's the one kind of hurdle that's um, you know most difficult. I will say we are going to be testing it extensively, and we're not going to just do a blind, even though I've heard good things, and I know they have a solution that's comparable. I'm not going to just go in and do a mass switchover. I'm going to do it kind of over time, but get that process started now so that we can be in a spot where we can walk away before the inevitable changes to come to pass. Which
So, so,
for those
so,
that, yeah.
so in your conversations, as you've been evaluating other solutions, um, how are the terms looking? Is it, more friendly to MSP, or is it more of that industry kind of 3 year, 5 year? Like, did they hear it? Like, I'm just curious, are you seeing the business model more MSP friendly, or are you seeing it more kind of VC PE models?
No, it seems very friendly. I mean, I'm as I'm getting into it, I don't see anything. I don't see uh, any red flags yet. Um, so I mean, it looks pretty good.
what about the hardware, right? I mean, you have boxes out there, and obviously with supply chain issues, like replacing stuff's probably not going to happen instantly. Are you going to be able to potentially repurpose, or are you going to have to replace?
Well, one of the things I didn't realize, which is that because we do prefer the device model, even well, in basically all cases. So you actually can repurpose some of the devices, which I was not aware of. But I'm also not opposed to getting new devices. Interestingly, we're at a point where we have a lot of older devices. This was going to be a big year of refresh on those devices, which so kind of works out as well. So yeah, I'm not. I'll probably be doing some of both.
Okay, this is interesting news. So it sounds like you're concentrating on the BDR,
Yeah.
situation. I assume the networking switches, access points.
I mean,
I mean,
listen, anybody that's used networking with Datto has known that that's been a bit of a weak spot for a while. And although we have a lot of it out there, it's something that will have to be deployed over time. And also, I don't think that it's nearly as much of a risk as the backup stuff. It's also a lot harder to go into, a location and be like, hey, I've got to change all your, I got to change all your network gear. Whereas the backup thing in many cases now could basically happen transparently if I wanted it to, but I will not make it transparent because I want people to understand what's going on. I like to let people know who their vendors are if they're interested in knowing, and many of them are. So I mean, I operate in New York and Connecticut, where Connecticut is where Datto is, and I have a lot of clients within a short radius of Datto, and they kind of know that story and are familiar with them. So so yeah, I'm
okay, so if the big concern from your perspective is, can you get all of this done before, theoretically, we know nothing, but let's be realistic. We're working backwards from what has happened in the past. If a terms of service changes, and all of a sudden, you have basically zero time to make a change, which means you have between now and whenever the deal closes, upstairs, do you have enough time to get the job done?
yeah, I think, and that's why we're moving now. And for what I've heard a lot of is going to wait and see what the changes are going to be, and we're going to talk to them, and they're going to keep doing, they're going to keep telling us stuff. First of all, as we know, they can't tell us much, if anything tangible, because of the rules around this kind of thing. And I would venture to say they will, anything they do tell you will be overwhelmingly positive, of course. I mean, there's not going to be a negative thing said, but just look at the history, look at the, just look at, you don't have to do much to figure it out. So, and it's very, very simplistic if you break it down to its core situation. This is a pre-IPO company that was going to go public last year, that is going to do everything they can to get as much new revenue as they can while cutting costs at the same time, so they can get their roadshow and be like, hey, look at what we've got, look what we've done in the last 6 months to a year, and then all bets are off once they go public. That is my opinion. So,
Okay.
and, I think things could be debatably even worse.
So do you, so big picture, you believe you're going to be able to flip the switch on your backup BDR story? You're going to let the networking ride. You think you're going to be able to just phase that out over time, but then
Yeah,
you still have PSA and RMM on the back end, which used to run your business to some degree.
right.
What happens if you're locked in for a while on that?
So we're probably in some kind of contract on RMM now. That might be on the longer side, because to get at the time, I have to, I should know, but I think we're in something. And but I won't, the PSA situation is such that it's really, I almost can't imagine making that change, as much as I have issues with it. The history in there, it just I don't know. I don't have the answer to that one yet. I really don't know. I don't know what that will look like yet. But my concern being reliability and functionality of backups, which are, I mean, so critical given the security environment we've talked about for the last several years. That's where I have to worry and focus my energy on at this point.
No, fair. I mean, that's the journey of somebody who's got a lot in data land, and that's one road for that's being taken. Anybody else want to throw their hat in the ring on what their thoughts are, where you're at? Are you affected? What research you've done? I mean, everyone can unmute if they want and jump in. No, everybody's scared today. About my good friend Tim Tolman. How you there? How you doing there, buddy?
Doing well, thank you, George. How are you doing?
Hanging in there. I'm sure the weather in San Diego is much better than Ohio.
Oh, it's horrible here. It's like 76 degrees, a light breeze, and not a cloud in the sky. It's horrible.
Yeah, you're in a great place. We all know that. Tim, do you have anything in data land? And what are you? And if you do, what are your thoughts? If you don't, I still want to hear your thoughts.
We don't have anything in data land. We use another provider, well, actually two different providers for different parts of the puzzle. And but as I sent you off a private email, our experiences with Kaseya are exactly what I'm hearing, and that's why I'm on these calls because we started out with Kaseya and ConnectWise, and our experience with Kaseya was that we weren't getting technical support. They would marry a product and then unmarry the product and then marry another product. And this was both with backup, it was with AV, it was with all sorts of different things. And it was just, we're a really small company, and it became way too chaotic for us to try to keep up. We were spending, hundreds of hours just learning new product or deciding whether we wanted to keep the old product, even though it was no longer supported by Kaseya. And so we came to the conclusion after, I don't know, probably about 2.5, 3 years that Kaseya was, there was no future for us with Kaseya. So we changed. And, we've been happy with that change. And again, no data, but I mean, everything I'm hearing from these calls and from other conversations that we've had is I agree with the previous speaker, and I'm sorry about that. With Darren, thank you. Is that the writing's on the wall in our experience, and hopefully that's not true and it will change. But past 10, 12, 14 years is pretty indicative that things may not be smooth.
When you're
a smart man, I just want to agree. I mean, you're seeing the same stuff I'm seeing, and the stuff that is readily available without doing much looking. I mean, Kaseya is a sales machine. I've never had any company market to me more aggressively, more consistently than they do. And that should tell you something. Most of their products have been bought by others and have debatably not developed as quickly or as fully as they would have elsewhere. Of course, they will say that's not true, but we see it with our own experience and stuff that we're locked into with them now that were not originally under their umbrella. So
completely agree.
Tim, how long ago did you make the switch off Kaseya?
Kaseya about, and again, it's going from memory, and mine's not as good as it used to be, but about 8 years ago, about 8 years ago, we moved on.
So this was, I mean, 8 years ago, you're talking about. This was before they really started huge, just rapid fire acquisition mode. Yeah.
Yeah. And what Darren said about marketing, they're no longer marketing to us because we're probably on their DNC list and their CRM, which was hard to get on. But the other company that just marketing fireball drives, that's not sometimes it's Barracuda, but we do use some of their products, and they work really well once you get them off the sales, your back sales.
Well, let's talk about them for a second. They just got acquired.
They did, and we've noticed essentially nothing in the space. We use Essentials for a segment of our clients, and they acquired Intronus, and we've been working with Intronus for years and years for certain specific applications. And we've really noticed nothing on the technical side that's raising red flags to us. So the red flags with Datto, again, we don't have Datto, but it's the history with Kaseya that's been the issue.
No, totally understand. Gonna pick on somebody else. Ann, you want to jump on and talk a little bit? Or she might be hiding behind the scenes. I'm gonna pick up. There you go. Hi, Ann.
There I am. Yeah, hey there. I was kind of doing a little work on the side here, and yeah, definitely I'm concerned about changes in terms. So we're Datto BDR users, Autotask PSA. So we have a lot invested in this, and it's I just feel the pain that everybody feels. Like it's very tough with everything that goes on day to day in an MSP. It's very tough to deal with any sort of change that's just thrust upon us. And I do agree. I get a lot of calls from Kaseya. I love like the powered services. There's a lot of great things that they do, but I'm concerned about. We work with true small business, not even a lot of SMBs, like really true small business. And we don't use 3-year terms with them. Things change. They stick with us forever because they like our service. But if more onerous terms are going to be introduced, that just doesn't work with our business model. And I guess they're saying that's not going to happen, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that they've come out and said, hey, there's certain things we can talk about, certain things we can. They seem to continue. Like there was I was watching another podcast where some of the Kaseya folks were on, and they're like, we need to do a better job training our salespeople and explaining the terms and the options, because this is a sales problem, sales training problem, not necessarily a how we do business problem. And I a little bit scratched my head because, there were legitimate, and I mean, to Darren's point, right? You don't have to look very far. There were acquisitions that were made where they made wholesale changes, right? You didn't have a choice other than leave or don't pay your next billing cycle or accept the new terms. And to me, that wasn't a sales training thing. But maybe moving forward, they're going to be like, hey, you can go, the more in terms that and this is a SaaS thing, right? The longer you commit, the better the price you get. Okay, fair. I mean, that's not an unheard of strategy, but like there's an option, right? You have a choice here in these past acquisitions, and we're not having to go back that far in this calendar. That didn't seem to be an option. It was accept the new terms or don't use the solution. So the problem is that, and Ann, I'd love to hear your opinion on this, like back end tools, right? And Darren said, hey, PSA, RMM, they may be the last thing that I look at, right? Because they may not be super customer visible in the way that they're running their business day to day, but like the other stuff is, part of their situation. You're going to say, well, the customer doesn't go and look at the data unit every day. Fine. But, given and I'm referencing back to Darren's point, given, hey, how critical backup is, and I know that's the primary thing Datto sells, and they sell a bunch of other things, but given how critical that one item is, you're almost in a situation where you're putting a lot of labor out to maybe make a change where you're not going to necessarily benefit other than to maintain your terms.
Yeah, I mean, I think like right now when you buy Dattos, and we love Dattos and the support's been really good with them. And if you invest in a longer term, you do get a better price, but you have that choice. You can go month to month, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year commitment, and you get a better deal. Or discount on hardware, et cetera. So if any vendor, I think that comes out with an approach like that, like if you want to commit longer, you get a better price, but they could do it the other way. If you want to avoid this horrible price increase, then that's a different story, because we don't plan, that's not in our budgets for our customers, and generally, unless there's some like really great deal, we wouldn't commit to a long term.
Yeah, I mean, like not to go backwards into maybe a past story, but if you're dealing with smaller business, right? Let's call it, I don't know, sub 25 employees, let's say it. How were you if like during pandemic times, those people were probably the most hit, right? Because, depending on their size business, they may have not had a lot of flexibility, right? To keep things going, because usually smaller businesses don't have a lot of cash stocked and piled up somewhere, right? So moving forward, right, I think there's probably a lot of worriedness, and even the Microsoft changes of late. I got to think there's been a lot of worry, some of, hey, well, I don't know where my business is going to go. I may hire, I may shrink. Like, we're just got to play it by feel, right? I mean, that's got to be what they're thinking.
Yeah, I mean, our general with the Microsoft changes, we've pretty much been on month to month, and we've advised our clients. We sort of presented it as you could get better pricing by committing long term, and we think that for a small business, just with the changes and uncertainty, the month to month works better. It does cost a little bit more. But, you know, again, that's something that, you know, Microsoft is Microsoft, and they put something out there and we all have to deal with it. And that's the way it is. And then I've heard rumors, and I don't know, you know, rumors true or not true, that they're going to start rating partners to figure out like
Sure.
who's worthy and who's not. So that's another change. I think as these, the partners that we work with them, when they become big and powerful, we don't have a lot of different choices. And our customers, you know, working with the small business space, they're used to dealing very, say like I'm thinking about one of our customers right now, 10-person accounting firm. They have very close relationships with their customers, and they expect to be working with a company like us that has very, you know, a very one-to-one relationship with them, gets to know them, and not, you know, we're not the big brother, you know, like we just can't walk in there and say, okay, now you're, you know, the new way we're doing business is you're locked in for 3 years and this is how it is. Like, that's just not the way the relationship works. And a lot of the small businesses, yeah, they were really hit hard by the pandemic. We've got a great customer that's a really amazing catering company. And they were just devastated, and they kept on skeleton staff, and we worked with them to try to, you know, discounts just to keep them moving through it. And they're tremendously talented and they're going to bounce back, but that's a business that was hugely impacted by the pandemic.
Yeah.
And
I mean, so let me throw this at you, Ann. What if the Kaseya Data folks take a page out of the Microsoft book? They come to you and say, hey, we're going to immediately increase pricing on all of the month to month by 20 to 40%, whatever, right? Just gonna throw a number out there. But if you agree to 3 years, we'll discount your pricing from where you're at.
yeah, 3 years is too long. That's too long for me. And I would, you know, a 1 year term, I'd consider. I just, so much changes in technology in 3 years. It's just too, and I can understand why they want to do it, but
I'm going to
it's
jump
just
into, yeah,
long.
and also sorry to talk over you, but you know, that's a big thing too. I have a lot of clients that have servers that, you know what, they're going to be end of life in a maybe 1 to 3 year period. And there's no way I'm going to commit to having a BDR solution for them when I might move them completely to, you know, to the cloud, which obviously has been happening for a long time, but there's also a case to not always do that. So, I mean, it's getting into a contract, anything more than a year, I would say, with that kind of situation now is just, at least for me, it makes no sense at all. You know, the other side of it is, it may have just been mentioned, I was moving around here, but I mean, they're going to push the Datto brand in, it's going to be sold direct. They've already said that. And it's going to be, if you think people, I mean, Datto is not necessarily a household name now, but, you know, since Kaseya's brand, despite what they may think, is so unpopular, you know, they're going to push Datto in every possible way, shape, and form, which, you know, I don't necessarily want that either. I don't need that. I mean, I know enough to pick the vendors for my clients and to be the one doing that, but I don't need them to make it into overexposure, so to speak, for which they've done with some other products that they've acquired, and this one will be.
So Darren, did I miss it? Did they actually say publicly they plan to sell Datto direct to?
I have been somebody that has been talked about on a couple of spots. So that's not from me, but that's from things I've read, which I believe is I think is accurate. I'm not saying that it's authoritative, but I have read that in a couple of places. So, which would be another reason to not, for obvious reasons, to not keep them around.
Yeah. Well, You know, that's it. I may have been under a rock because I hadn't heard that one, and it's tough to decipher what's rumor. I mean, they did emphatically say that Datto brand's really strong. They have awesome support, and they're going to continue that. But gosh, so that's definitely something I want to look at if they're gonna go direct. That makes things pretty complicated.
Well, I mean, they have awesome support because they have the people that enable that support. I'm talking about starting at the top all the way down.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and the likelihood, in my opinion, that all of those people will remain, I mean, over the long term is, it just doesn't seem, if you look at what happens with every other situation where a company has this kind of thing. And I don't think there actually is one you can even compare this to, given you're going from, you know, I won't even say what I'm going to say. So anyway, this is a different one, but still the people have to remain, and the costs have to be, you know, they have to not want to, when they look at what that level of support costs, and they don't have full visibility into that now. There's no way that they could. So I think it will be, wait a second, hold on, we can cut support costs by 40%. We can take out these data centers you're paying for. We can put the stuff in Amazon's cloud. That's a lot cheaper. I mean,
Well,
just
hold on. Let me reply to a couple of things there. One, moving anything into Amazon's cloud when you already have, like, the reason Datto's been able to do, and other companies like Datto's been able to do what they're doing, is because once you get to a certain threshold in public cloud, the costs are diminishing, right? You actually save money by going the other way. Now, there's volume involved, right? So let's be fair. But part of that is definitely volume, and their volume is way higher than that volume. I mean, so take that for what it's worth too.
Okay.
There's always, when you take two large organizations and try and smash them together, that takes time. And probably, I mean, and we've seen examples of, not that far away, right? There was, Autotask and Datto. That's one example. There's ConnectWise and Continuum. That's another example. There's Kaseya and pick whatever acquisition they've had, right? It takes, I don't know, a couple of years, right? To, like, number one, let things run, evaluate what's there, figure out where the overlap is, and then decide what makes sense. But to your point, Darren, like, maybe they come to you and Ann and everyone else and say, hey, what about a 1-year deal so that your pricing doesn't go up? Ann says 1 year is probably okay, 3's not, right? Maybe you say the same, Darren. But, like, if the organization's going to take at least 18 months, 24 months to flush out what the changes are going to be, maybe there's runway there.
That's a fair point. But at the same time, I think they're going to do things as quickly as possible to increase if it wasn't for the IPO that they very publicly talked about and desired for last year, if that wasn't such a prominent thing that factors in to this whole situation, I would say maybe you're right. But given that, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure, thank you, to just build up as much as they can and lock people in as quickly as they can. So
yeah, I mean, but from a is the product going to be supported standpoint, I mean, there's a learning curve, right? I can't expect that they're, like, Kaseya is now a very large organization when you think about the headcount, right? I mean, Joe P from Channel EDE Penetary started listing what the organizational headcount is once you look at the landscape, right? And, like, I was talking to a couple other kind of sales leaders in the industry, and it's interesting, like, when you add up all of those companies, right? You take all the big guys in the sandbox, SolarWinds, Enable, I guess they're now Enable now, sorry. Enable MSP, right? Or, and then, the now combined Datto, Kaseya, assuming that gets done, ConnectWise, Barracuda, all these guys, right? Ninja. It works out to something like 10,000 employees across all of those companies. Go back and check the article. It's on channeled.com. 10,000 employees as an ecosystem is kind of small in comparison to enterprise, right? Like the Microsofts and the Apples and the SAPs and all those things. So just, while we are going to feel it because we deal with these companies every day, in the overall, scheme of all the businesses out there in the technology space, it's relatively small if you think about it. But it does take time, and quite frankly, if they're talking about reducing headcount, Darren, I just don't think it's realistic for them to take support and technical people from other business units, and in a 3, 6, 9, 12-month period, shift that, support over and keep I'm sure your point is, that's what I'm trying to say. They're not going to be able to keep the quality and consistency up. I just don't think they're going to be able to do it at all. It just takes time for that training to occur.
Yeah. I think the thing that really differentiated, I was going to say, the service has been such a big differentiator for Datto, so that'd be a tough one. If they cut that, I think the product loses a lot. But it would be interesting if there's filing for an IPO, boy, the temptation is large to say why, to investors, and that they have fiduciary responsibility to investors, like sell this direct.
Right. Well, that's exactly it.
That'll be an interesting one to watch. Temptation might be too big, because Austin McCord always said it would be channel, they work with MSPs always, but that's kind of long gone.
Well, Kaseya, let's go back to Kaseya, right? Their original product, the one Tim was using it back 8 years ago, VSA. That's the one Darren keeps on bringing back, and probably our friend Brian Weiss and a couple other people, right? That's the hack from 2021. Hopefully all of those plugs have been, at least duct taped over or cemented or whatever analogy you want to use. But they have traditionally sold a lot of their products, even the companies they've acquired, to internal IT. I mean, that's not a secret. I mean, if you actually ask Kaseya about their conference, right? The actual, forget, GlueX for a second. That's one of their conferences that's been moved, I think, to Miami from Phoenix. Put that off to the side a second. Put all the other sub brands in like a bubble. Their big conference has historically been in Vegas. I think it's going to be in Vegas for at least the next 3 or 4 years. When you ask about the attendance at their own conference, they'll say it's about 60% MSP, 40% internal IT, right? So those are businesses on the street that just acquire those technologies directly. So to that point, Darren, if you have heard, and I would love to,
this is something I read. I don't want to, I'm certainly not authoritative on it at all. It's something that it was read somewhere. I thought I saw it in 2 places, but I mean, and I don't, by the way, I don't think they would tell you that, and I don't think they would necessarily tell you one way or the other. It'll just be something that if they're not saying it now, but let's say they're not, it could just happen overnight. If you look at the track record, as you just explained, you're now in a situation where Austin Vision is so far gone that, I mean, you've done a full 360 from that.
But to be fair, Darren, right? Datto made acquisitions. Datto bought Open Mesh for their networking. Datto bought Backupify for their SaaS backup. And there were enterprise companies that were, they couldn't transition in some cases to a partner, and they continued dealing with those companies to keep their stuff running. I know it's not exactly the same, but like, I'm sure somewhere in the overall scheme of things, if you're large enough, right? Like if the majority of MSPs are surveyed, and let's say even the bigger guys deal with, 800 and below, or 1,000 or below, let's use that number. 1,000 and above, maybe they would deal with them directly, because the chances of that customer kind of company competing with the downstream MSP is very low. I mean, do you agree with that?
Yeah, without a doubt. But I think that if you're looking for, if you're looking for maximum revenue generation for your shareholders, then you will take every method possible to get there. And that's just,
I think you're trying to say cut off your nose and spite your face, right? Hey, money at all costs. I
mean, everything we've seen from, so it's
okay.
just, yeah.
All right. I hear you, Darren, and thanks, Ann, for chiming in there. Brian, you're quiet. I'm going to pick on you. Are you out there? Maybe Brian's just listening and to everybody else chat a little bit. Jaya, you're out there too. Would love to hear your thoughts if you're around the unmute button.
I'm here now.
Oh, okay. Hi, Brian.
Hey,
So you've been hearing all of the chatter so far. Where are you at in the mix?
well, when we first got involved, we hated Datto from the get-go because they were snake oil salesmen, always trying to push hardware on you, and that was years ago. So we're sort of different. We went to Veeam. We tried a few things, like the product that Kaseya bought and is now selling. It didn't work for us, so
Trends, right?
we're a Veeam partner, and we have our own cloud storage in 2 places, and we just keep all the money instead of sending 80% in.
Interesting, but it does take time to maintain that now.
Yeah, but a lot of this stuff is set and forget, and we get reports every morning of what failed, what worked. So
Okay.
it's working fairly well.
So it
And,
sounds like you're totally, yeah, like you're not affected at all unless you're utilizing
No.
stuff internally, right?
We have IT glue from Kaseya, and you're right, they call you all the time and they rotate salespeople, and they're always trying to give you a deal to buy one of their products. We use ConnectWise normally. We found that if you get products from ConnectWise, they can't really support them, so we went to PAX 8 for most of our products. Now we're at PAX 8.
You're talking about like third-party products.
Yeah, like Bitdefender. We had
Okay.
quite a few seats of that. We asked them for support. It was just horrible. And PAX 8 has a different attitude where they have specialists, and we transferred everything there because we've had a good experience with PAX 8.
So when you have a product like Veeam or Bitdefender, are you buying Veeam through PAX 8 as well?
I'm not sure because we were a direct cloud partner. I'm not
Okay.
responsible for that. I just know what products we're using.
Got it. So, but when you're engaging PAX 8, PAX 8's supporting some of those products before you actually work with the vendor support.
Well, we've been with Veeam such a while, so I'm not sure if we moved it to PAX 8 or not.
Got it.
But we've been doing Veeam for 3-4 years.
Okay.
more.
What about PSA RMM?
We're using ConnectWise.
Okay.
And what's it called this week?
Branding.
Control. What is it?
So you're talking about automate, control. I know their new one is not real, like a Asielgo, or I forget the exact pronunciation.
We started Lab Tech. That's how long ago we started,
Lab.
and just
Yeah.
keeps getting new names as we go forward.
Yeah, I
And
think
then-
that's still automate. Yeah.
I really don't know where they're going because they're even calling us and trying to sell us Continuum. They don't have any, don't seem to have any vision of where they're going.
Have you seen any of the continuum side stuff?
A long time ago, not recently, but we're really entrenched with the ConnectWise products. I don't know where they're going. If they're trying to sell it as a separate product, as well as ConnectWise, you're really not, they're going to have to come up with a merge somehow. A merge product.
I think that's what this new product is the one that they rebranded or kind of launched at IT Nation in November. I think that's like that all coming together a little bit.
Is it soup yet?
I'm gonna be honest with you, Brian. I haven't seen it in order to say whether it makes sense or not. I know it's still really new. And I just haven't really had a chance to see if the car runs. But I mean, just like Darren's doing, right? He's going out there, checking, kicking tires to see what's viable, what's not. I mean, I think everybody, I can only assume the conversation there, right? Hey, there's automate, there's continuum. Obviously, they're moving towards this new brand, this new kind of combined solution. At some point, does automate get sunset, right? Does a product just go end of life? I mean, they haven't announced that.
So we see that going to Intune.
Okay.
You know what I mean? As far as when that becomes better, we'll probably migrate to Intune since it's part of the 365 stack.
Yeah, and then Lighthouse and a lot of the other stuff that sits on top of that. That's interesting.
And we don't see how those guys, the RMMs, are going to be able to compete against that.
Well, I think there has been APIs into some of that stuff, right? I think Enable was the first one to announce that, and then others have started to kind of roll down that lane, right? Where Microsoft's provided them API access so that they can actually kind of merge the experience together a little bit. But that does, that does beg the question. If you're all in on 365, obviously their partner programs change, and mention partner scoring,
Yeah.
you still qualify. But assuming that that's the route, I mean, yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Now, we viewed Microsoft's changes as not that they're trying to scab the customers, but they were trying to stop poaching as far as people trying to churn your customers. Now there's only one time a year you can churn someone's customers.
That's interesting because like, listen, there's any number of reasons why people break up, right? Like from a provider and an end customer, and like sometimes it's just they can't, Ann's working with slightly smaller accounts. Maybe they ran into a bad patch, they can't afford it, right? Or maybe it's, new management came in and they want to go with their guy or whatever, right? Something bad happened. They're just not happy with the service. But, that makes it hard for people to leave you, but it also makes it hard for you to get new people too.
That's true. That's true. But we'll just wait with the date written down.
Yeah. You can say, hey, we're going to leave everything except for that. We'll deal with that later. Kind of thing.
Just pick the date and say we'll do that later.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I understand exactly what you're saying.
I just wanted to toss in real quick on, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what Microsoft is going to do in this space. In terms of the, because we were long-term Continuum partners, and then that became part of ConnectWise. And from what I've seen is there's some really good work to pull together the best of both worlds on those. And also the new work with the architecture to tie together a whole bunch of different pieces. I think good things are really going to come out of that. So, but Microsoft's the wild card out there for the future. Who knows?
I mean, it's funny. It's interesting. So Dave Sobel, right? It's a pretty loud guy out there at times. MSP Radio. He came out and said last week, kind of like underneath of all the noise that we've been talking about in this session, both Apple and Microsoft had formally, announced their RMM style solutions for business. So, and then I think I saw in Joe Panettieri's kind of like daily posting from Channel EDE, Microsoft has started releasing consulting options for small business direct as well. So this direct indirect thing is starting to get really gray.
George, Apple, I mean, that app, what they're referring to with the Apple thing, Apple basically has small business, MDM, but it does a lot of different things that we just tried to sign up for it just to try it out for a client. And basically the response is that we're overwhelmed with demand. It's going to take some time for us to get back to you and, activate your account. And that's been over a week so far. And we have been unable to, and I mean, which for Apple to have that kind of situation is kind of like, whoa. So I don't, it's definitely, and Microsoft already essentially has this. So it's
my big concern, and you guys mentioned usually when you see MSP surveys, and it's like polling, right? It's a sampling. One of the top things, and we've heard it in this session, other than pricing, is support. Historically, Microsoft support and Apple support, not stellar. So, now you're relating that to the MSP. If the support's not there, do you adopt that? I mean, Brian, you said, hey, we may do Intune, right? So,
yeah, but we would do it through PAX 8 where they could support us.
Okay, fair
You
enough.
know what I mean?
I agree with that approach, and I should say this too. We're looking when I talked about earlier with Axion, is we would definitely do it through PAX 8 because we're trying to consolidate stuff with them, and it's nice to have another layer, without a doubt, of people that are just there to help, as opposed to needing to rely 100% on on the vendor. So
fair enough. Tim, welcome. Tim was our actual other speaker for today. I'm going to pull a couple of thoughts out of Tim's head while we have a little bit of time left. Tim, welcome.
Thanks, George.
Tim's from Netgain IT. They're actually going to be helping us again with hosting the Channel Strong Tour, so that not this week because we're almost wrapping up here in Ohio, but the next week we go out, we'll be stopping by Netgain's place, and we really appreciate that.
We're happy to have you.
Awesome. Tim, the group here has been talking about kind of current events, And I know Netgain has many locations and you've been acquiring MSPs. If you're willing, I would love to hear your opinion on the recent Datto Kaseya news. And then kind of on a wider standpoint, how do you evaluate all of the vendor relationships as you're looking at, all of these MSPs that you've put together? Because there's different terms, there's different, situations on how people have adopted their stack. And like, I gotta assume that, we've talked about it, in the past, maybe not with you directly, but you as a larger entity probably have a little bit more negotiating capability than a smaller individual MSP.
Sure. The one thing I have realized as it pertains to Kaseya and Datto is that it's hard to guess at somebody's underwriting philosophy and what they view as a strategic acquisition. I think that the implications for partners is going to be really interesting because, and I think you saw some of this with the reaction that some folks from the Huntress team had, but I think that Kaseya as an aggregator has been acquiring and gobbling up a lot of different players that a lot of the channel partners have good relationships with. And for many of those players, folks haven't necessarily seen that drive the kinds of outcomes that they wanted to. So I think that there's notable and perhaps very, very real consternation among folks when they see a big provider like Datto go to Kaseya. But I think it's clear that a lot of the players who have significant capital behind them are playing the consolidation game, even if it doesn't necessarily on the surface fit perfectly in their core business model or what they're trying to do. So, I think that the MSP space is one that is just everywhere witnessing consolidation, distributors, vendors, the people like us. It's just happening everywhere. So I'll be really curious to see whether or not the theses that these deals are underwritten with actually come to fruition. As it pertains to us and getting some scale and some leverage, this has been one of the more confounding lessons that I have had to learn as we've gotten larger, is that in a lot of cases, when we try and explore synergies with partners, we find that the opposite ends up being true, that the MSPs that we've acquired have nice grandfathered in prices with vendors that they've worked with for 10 years. And when those vendors were trying to grow, they gave great deals to people. And that by asking for them to come under the Netgain umbrella, what it ends up doing is it puts us on the account exec's radar for the first time in 10 years. And he realizes we've been getting this sweet deal that we otherwise wouldn't have been getting. So I've actually found more often than not that dyssynergies are what we see when we try and negotiate with a lot of these vendors, which again is one of the reasons why ServiceNow is eating up a lot of good market share, because I think ServiceNow is really being savvy about how they're delivering on increasing scale advantages to partners. So, and I don't mean that as a knock on ConnectWise necessarily. It's not kind of what I'm here to do, but it's just been a fascinating experiment that way. But there have been certainly relationships that we've been able to leverage largely on the distributor side, where distributors get what we're doing. They get the purchasing scale. They sort of get the fact that despite the fact we're allowing our entities to operate autonomously from one another, that there is some real parent-child relationship that exists there. So that's where we've seen it better. Same with, financing and things of that nature. Less so on the, ConnectWise, Logic Monitor, any of those tool, Arctic Wolf, any of those sort of tool and service providers, we've had less success getting any sort of real synergies, which I hope will change.
Yeah, it's very intriguing that you said that, right? It's like, hey, we're not going to upset the beehive. We're just going to let it run because we may be artificially increasing our price if we go and ask. Almost counterintuitive to some degree, right? Because you would hope that with more volume, there's more flexibility for you guys to have a more strategic partnership, right?
Yeah, totally. And it has been a very interesting insight. And who knows whether or not that'll be true forever. I think that the vendors are sort of just catching up a little bit to some of what they're seeing in the market. But yeah, it's been really interesting and one of the things that I think we did not expect going into this strategy.
Okay, so Netgain is backed by like a PEVC style situation. And like, obviously there's, with any investor, they expect numbers. So when you look at these major, kind of, hey, we're going out there, we're raising billions of dollars to do these deals. I mean, the idea that things are going to stay the same, like I said 24 months, right? I said 18 to 24 months for things to shake out. It always seems to be that's the number, whether they feel, hey, we have redundancies and we can use some support from other places, some sales from other places. Is the executive team still going to be here? Do you feel that that's the right number, or what's your experience?
Not for us. So we are, the name of our backer is Evergreen Services Group, and that is their whole philosophy. So we don't have a liquidity turn and burn. Let's see what we can get out of this as quickly as we can philosophy. We plan to hold the assets that we acquire forever. In a very similar model to sort of the Berkshire Hathaway holding company standpoint. So that's not what we're not in the business of trying to make businesses worse for the long term, but make them look better in the short term, which is one of the reasons why we do what we do from a decentralization standpoint. So I'll just give you a good example. When we acquire an entity in, call it Columbus, Ohio, and it's an entity that has 8 days a week, 8 to 5 days a week coverage, for instance. We don't automatically go in and tell that business, hey, we're going to turn you to 24/7, 365, and hey, you have to come onto our ConnectWise instance, or hey, you have to do things the way that we do them. And the reason we don't is because we try and find high quality businesses in the first place. So we don't try and buy fixer uppers. We try and partner with great businesses that already have great retention, good growth trajectories, et cetera. And that allows us to help MSPs in areas that they're usually not as good at. Institutional growth engine. So moving away from owner-led growth towards institutional sales and marketing. Mature finance and accounting, which is something that I think a lot of times MSPs, less mature MSPs struggle with, and scale advantages of benefits. So HR, recruiting, all those things. But anything that's client facing, we really don't touch, and we try and leave alone, because at the end of the day, these people have been doing something right. Their customers sign up for something. They are familiar with the brand. There was an aggregator strategy in the early 2000s of HVAC consolidators that tried to integrate everything and make everything look the exact same, and then eventually went bankrupt, and someone went and bought all those assets, flipped them back to their old brands, and absolutely crushed it, because people have an affinity for the local brand, for the orange t-shirts, to the text who they get to call a certain name, to the way they put their tickets in. So the thing we're trying to preserve is good client relationships, good employee relationships. And in some cases that can, centralization and integration is sort of like, weeds. We have to continually be fighting them back because people really think they want it to occur. So that's been what we've done.
It's interesting. When this all started, I originally brought up hey, there's Toyota and there's Lexus, and then there's Honda and there's Acura. I mean, I've if these guys have been following me, I've been watching the Foods That Built America, and then you start to see these major food conglomerates, right? Where all of a sudden the cereal's still the same name, the cookie's still the same name, the bread is still the same name, but hey, there's this big conglomerate on top of them that you wouldn't even know, because when you go down the aisle in the supermarket, it's still whatever, Lucky Charms, Frosted Flakes, whatever. It kind of sounds like what you're talking about, right? Like the brand has value, and it doesn't make sense to dilute that.
Yeah, and frankly, we believe that the people closest to the customer have the best information for how to drive value. So far be it from me, sitting with a cursory view of a business to tell a business owner, hey, this is what I think is the right thing for your customers. Most of the time, even if the seller of the business doesn't stick around, most of the time the local team is going to know better what customers want and how to grow their business than I could ever dream to. So that's what we believe unlocks the most long-term potential. And we're willing to leave some of these very sexy synergies on the table because we think that the customer experience is what's most important.
So hypothesize for me then.
Sure.
Why wouldn't the software companies in our sandbox, in our space, use that strategy versus what seems to be happening?
I think that a lot of times when you're underwriting a deal and you're saying, here's the thing that I'm going to pay for this business, in order for you to be able to pay that a high price, in many cases, you have to say the cost structure of the business is going to be Y once we acquire it, or the revenue structure of the business is going to be Y once we acquire it. So in a lot of cases, the fundamental business case that was used to buy this business or acquire this asset bakes in projected synergies, cost reductions, headcount reductions, et cetera. We don't do that. We bake in, if we did nothing to this business, would we be happy to own it?
Very interesting. Well, we didn't get a lot of time with Tim, but like really interesting to hear somebody who is playing with outside money, right? Is playing with an outside finance and investment type company, but the strategy is diametrically different, right? At their place in the world versus what we're talking about. Tim, I can't wait to see you out on the next tour. We're excited to jump out and see the Netgain folks.
I'm really sorry I was running behind. I really am sorry about that, George. And for those of you I haven't had the opportunity to meet, it's really good to meet you.
Awesome. Well, Tim, we're gonna talk soon again. I appreciate you jumping on even for a little bit. Everyone, I appreciate you guys for sharing today. This session was recorded, so it'll be online shortly at mspinitiative.com under sessions, and we'll catch you again Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1 o'clock Eastern time. Thanks a lot, Tim.
Thank you.